pattern, multiple, false, replacement. Daniel had always been curious about places that few people ever visited. While others dreamed of cities filled with lights, parties, and busy crowds, he dreamed of silence, open skies, and the mysteries hidden far away from noise. One summer, he decided to go on a journey into a desert that stretched endlessly, a place many avoided because of its harsh sun in the day and freezing winds at night. Daniel carried only a backpack, a water bottle, and a small notebook where he loved to write down his thoughts. And on the fourth night of his journey, he sat on a small sand dune. The desert sky looked like a giant black ocean sprinkled with stars. Daniel leaned back, staring up, thinking about how tiny humans were compared to the endless universe above. He had always wondered if someone, somewhere, beyond those stars, was looking back at Earth. He smiled at the thought, not knowing that his question was about to be answered in a way he could never have imagined. As he gazed upward, he noticed something unusual. A light, brighter than any star, appeared in the sky. At first he thought it was a shooting star, but instead of streaking across the horizon, it slowed down. The light grew larger, brighter, and closer. Daniel's heart began to race. It wasn't falling, it was landing. The ground beneath him trembled. Sand swirled in circles as the glowing object descended. Daniel shielded his eyes from the brilliance until it dimmed slightly, revealing a shape. It wasn't a rock or a meteor. It was smooth silver and shining like polished glass. A door opened, releasing a gentle wave of light. Out of it stepped a figure. Daniel's breath caught in his chest. The figure was tall, elegant, and dressed in silver armor that sparkled like the night sky itself. Her presence was powerful, yet strangely calming. She was not human. Her features were otherworldly, with eyes that shimmered like galaxies and hair that glowed faintly like the moonlight. She carried herself like someone used to respect, like a leader. Daniel's instinct told him she was no ordinary visitor. She was a queen. The desert was silent except for the soft sound of sand shifting under her feet as she walked toward him. Daniel froze in place. He didn't know whether to run, bow, or speak. But before he could decide, she closed the distance and suddenly embraced him. Her arms were warm, gentle yet firm, and he felt as though time had stopped. Daniel's eyes widened in shock. Why would an alien, someone so majestic and powerful, hug a simple traveler like him? Then he heard her whisper, her voice soft yet filled with deep emotion. "I've finally found you, my human." Daniel's heart pounded loudly in his chest. He could hardly believe what he had just heard. What did she mean by those words? Found him? Why him? He was just an ordinary man wandering through a desert with no special skills, no fame, and no great story. Yet here she was, speaking as if he had been missing from her life for years. He slowly pulled back from the hug, looking into her glowing eyes. They were filled with relief, almost as if she had been searching for him for a very long time. Daniel tried to speak, but his voice trembled. I think you're mistaken. I'm nobody important, I'm just Daniel." The queen tilted her head, her expression soft but certain. "You may not remember, but you are not just a wanderer. You are the one I have searched for across the stars." And her words sent shivers down his spine. He wanted to laugh nervously, to deny everything, but there was something in her voice, something too genuine to ignore. It wasn't just belief, it was truth for her. Daniel stood silently, unsure of what to do. The desert that had once felt so empty now felt like the center of the universe. The queen gestured toward the glowing silver vessel behind her. "Come with me. Your journey does not end here. It is only beginning." Daniel hesitated. His mind was filled with questions, doubts, and fear, but at the same time a part of him felt drawn to her, as if some invisible thread connected them. He looked once more at the endless desert around him. There was nothing there for him. No home, no reason to stay. Perhaps his destiny really was waiting beyond the stars. Taking a deep breath, Daniel nodded slowly. "All right, I'll go with you." Then the Queen's face softened into a gentle smile. She held out her hand, and though Daniel's hand shook slightly, he placed it in hers. Her grip was warm and reassuring. Together they walked toward the Igar vessel. As Daniel stepped inside, he felt a rush of air and light surround him. The walls glowed with shifting patterns, and he realized he was standing inside something alive, something far beyond human technology. Before he could take in more, the door closed and the ship began to rise. Through a small opening, Daniel saw the desert shrinking below. His heart pounded faster, but not just from fear, from wonder. He was leaving Earth. He was leaving everything he had ever known. And all because a mysterious alien queen believed she had finally found him. He turned to her, still confused, still overwhelmed. "Why me?" he asked softly. "Why did you come for me?" She looked at him with a gaze that felt ancient, as though she had carried his memory for centuries. "Because you are mine," she whispered. "You always have been. You always will be." Daniel sat silently, staring at her. He wanted to argue, to say she had made a mistake, but deep inside, a small spark of curiosity grew. Could it be possible? Could he really have a place among the stars, a purpose greater than wandering deserts and writing in notebooks? He did not know yet, but one thing was certain. His life had changed forever the moment she hugged him and whispered those words. And so, under the vast and endless sky, Daniel's story began, not as a lost traveler, but as someone chosen, someone bound by a destiny he had yet to understand. Pattern, multiple, false, replacement. Daniel's days in Ilaria began to stretch into weeks, and slowly he started to learn about the world that now surrounded him. At first, everything felt overwhelming. The glowing forests that hummed softly at night, the rivers that sparkled like silver threads, the floating creatures that glided through the skies like birds made of light. Every sight reminded him that he was far from Earth. Yet despite his confusion, he felt a strange comfort here, as if he belonged in ways he could not explain. The Queen, Seraphina, made sure that Daniel was never left alone in his questions. Each day she spent time with him, walking through the palace gardens, sharing meals in halls where the ceiling shimmered like the night sky, or simply sitting with him and listening. She was not only a ruler to her people, but also a patient guide for him. Her presence was calming, her voice gentle but filled with strength. Daniel began to notice that whenever he doubted himself, her words carried a light that pushed away his fear. And in one afternoon they walked together through the palace gardens. The plants there were alive in ways Daniel had never seen. Flowers that opened when they sensed footsteps, trees that glowed brighter when touched. Daniel reached out to one flower, and it leaned toward him as if greeting him. He laughed softly. "Even the plants here are friendlier than people back home." Seraphina smiled at his words. "They recognize your spirit. This world knows you, even if your memory does not." And Daniel shook his head, still uncertain. "It's hard to believe that. Back on Earth, I was just ordinary. No one ever looked twice at me. Here, everyone stares as if I'm something special. It doesn't make sense." She stopped and looked at him with serious eyes. "You see yourself as ordinary, Daniel, but sometimes greatness hides in the ones who least expect it. Your heart carries something rare. That is why this world responds to you." Her words stayed in his mind long after. He began noticing that she looked at him differently from others, not as a ruler to a subject, but as someone who cared deeply. There was warmth in her eyes every time she saw him. Daniel did not know what to call it, but he felt it too. It was as though he had known her for years, even though he had only just met her. At night, they often sat by the crystal lake near the palace. The water reflected the stars, and glowing fish swam beneath the surface, lighting up the waves. One night, Daniel asked, "Seraphina, doesn't it tire you? Ruling, leading, carrying the weight of so many lives? And she looked at the lake for a moment before answering. It does. There are days when the burden feels heavy, but then I remember why I bear it. Not for power, but for my people, for peace, and for you. And Daniel turned his head quickly, surprised. For me? Her voice lowered, soft like the breeze. Yes. Even when you were gone, I carried the hope that one day we would meet again. That hope gave me strength through the darkest nights. And Daniel felt his chest tighten. He didn't know how to respond. He had never been someone's hope before. On Earth, no one had ever looked at him like that. For the first time, he felt seen, not as an ordinary man, but as someone important to another heart. As the bond between them grew, whispers spread in the palace. Guards exchanged glances when they saw Daniel walking beside the queen. Servants bowed more deeply, not only out of respect for Seraphina, but also for him. Some looked with curiosity, some with doubt, but none dared to speak against the queen's closeness to a human. Daniel noticed but chose to ignore it, though inside he wondered if he truly deserved her trust. One evening, the queen invited Daniel to join a council gathering. It was a meeting of leaders from different regions of her world. Daniel felt nervous as he entered the grand chamber, where tall figures with glowing crowns and shimmering cloaks sat around a crystal table. Their eyes fell on him immediately. "Nan, this is the human?" one of them asked in a low, cautious voice. "Yes," Seraphina replied firmly. "This is Daniel. He is my guest, and more than that, he is the one destiny has returned to." Saracen murmurs filled the room. Daniel sat quietly, feeling the weight of their stares. He wanted to shrink, but he remembered Seraphina's words. Greatness hides in the ones who least expect it. Taking a deep breath, he straightened his back and listened. Throughout the meeting, Daniel said little, but he observed. The leaders spoke of rising threats beyond their borders, enemies gathering strength, shadows spreading in distant lands. Fear lay beneath their words, though they tried to hide it. Daniel noticed things they missed: hesitation, worry, and the way their voices trembled. When the queen asked his thoughts, he hesitated but then spoke honestly. "You all speak of fear. Maybe what your people need is not more rules or weapons, but hope. Fear breaks hearts before battles even begin. Hope gives them the strength to stand." The room fell silent. The leaders exchanged glances, surprised by the simple but sharp truth from a human stranger. Seraphina's lips curved into a proud smile. "You see? Even without memory, his heart knows the path." And after the meeting, she turned to him. "You may doubt yourself, Daniel, but you are already guiding us." He laughed nervously. "I didn't guide anyone, I just spoke what I felt." "And that," she replied softly, "is what true guidance is." With each passing day, Daniel felt his bond with Seraphina deepen. She showed him the beauty of her world, and he shared stories of Earth, simple things like sunsets, forests, and the quiet of the desert. She listened with genuine interest, as if every small detail mattered. And Daniel, in turn, listened to her stories of struggles, battles, and victories she had faced. They were from different worlds, yet their hearts met in the same place. One night Daniel dreamed again. This time the vision was stronger. He saw himself holding Seraphina's hand as they stood before a great storm of shadows. Together they raised their arms and light burst forth, pushing the darkness away. When he woke, he remembered every detail clearly. The dream no longer felt like imagination. It felt like a memory waiting to return. The more time he spent with Seraphina, the more he began to feel different. He no longer saw himself as the lost wanderer of Earth. He began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he was meant for something greater. He didn't have all the answers, but he had something he never had before: purpose, connection, and a queen who looked at him not as a stranger but as someone irreplaceable. Daniel stood one morning on the palace balcony, watching the rising twin suns of Ilaria. Serafina joined him, her presence quiet but powerful. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" she asked softly. Daniel shook his head. "What?" She placed her hand gently over his heart. "I see the one who will stand with me not because destiny commands it, but because his heart chooses it. That is who you are, Daniel. That is why I call you mine." Daniel looked into her eyes, and for the first time he did not feel the urge to argue or deny. Instead, he felt warmth spreading through him, a certainty that he could not explain. Maybe she was right. Maybe he had been found for a reason. The shy wanderer from Earth had begun to change, and though he didn't realize it yet, he was stepping into the role that destiny had whispered for him since the beginning. Pattern, multiple false, replacement. Daniel could hardly believe his eyes as the silver vessel carried him across space. The ship moved silently, almost like it was gliding through water, though outside was endless darkness filled with countless stars. He pressed his hand against the glowing wall and the surface shifted like liquid, showing him visions of planets, galaxies, and colors he had never seen before. Every moment felt unreal. He whispered to himself, "This can't be happening." But it was happening, and the alien queen stood calmly by his side as if everything was natural. And her presence was powerful, yet comforting. She did not speak much during the journey, but when she did, her voice carried warmth. "Do not be afraid," she said softly. "You are safe now." Her words didn't answer his questions, but somehow they eased his fear. Daniel looked at her carefully. She seemed so sure, so certain about him while he felt lost and confused. And after hours, or perhaps days, since time felt strange in space, the ship slowed down. A breathtaking view opened before him. Floating in the dark sky was a planet unlike any he had imagined. It glowed with shades of blue and violet surrounded by shimmering rings. As they entered the atmosphere, Daniel saw vast glowing forests, rivers of silver light, and mountains that sparkled as if covered in crystals. The world looked alive, like a dream painted with magic. The ship landed on a grand platform made of shining stone. Thousands of lights illuminated the place, and strange creatures moved gracefully around. Some were tall with wings of light. Others had smooth skin that shimmered like water. Daniel stared, speechless. He had stepped into a world beyond human imagination. The queen placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "Welcome to Ilaria, my world, and now, your home." Daniel's mouth went dry. Home? He wasn't sure what she meant, but he followed her down a wide path that led to a grand palace. The palace itself looked like it had grown from the earth rather than being built. Its towers reached into the sky, and glowing vines wrapped around them, casting soft light. The gates opened as if recognizing the queen, and everyone inside bowed deeply as she passed. But what surprised Daniel was that they bowed to him too. And whispers filled the air. "The human has returned, the prophecy is true." Daniel felt their eyes on him, filled with curiosity and respect. He wanted to hide, but the queen walked with confidence, and so he kept moving beside her. Inside the palace, the walls were alive with flowing patterns of light. Strange floating crystals lit the halls, and the air carried a sweet fragrance. The queen led him into a great chamber, where she finally sat down on a throne made of shining silver and crystal. Daniel stood awkwardly in the center of the room, still unsure what was happening. "Narnian, please," she said, motioning to a seat across from her. "Sit, Daniel." He obeyed, though his heart pounded. Finally, he found the courage to speak. "I don't understand any of this. Why are these people treating me like I'm important? I'm not special, I'm just me." The queen's eyes softened. "You may not see it yet, but you are part of something far greater. Our history speaks of one who would return from the stars, one who would stand by my side in the time of greatest need. That one is you." And Daniel shook his head quickly. That's impossible. I've never been here before. I don't know your people, your world, or your history. I'm not who you think I am. But she leaned forward, her voice calm and steady. Then explain your dreams. And Daniel froze. He had not told anyone about his dreams, yet she knew. For weeks before his journey, he had dreamt of strange places, glowing forests, battles with shadowy figures, and always a woman in silver standing beside him. He thought they were just dreams, products of his imagination. But now he realized they were too close to reality. How do you know about my dreams? He asked in a whisper. Because I saw them too, she replied gently. They were memories, Daniel. Memories of another time, another life. He felt his chest tighten. Memories of another life? The idea sounded impossible, yet something deep inside him stirred. He thought about how he felt when she first hugged him. It wasn't just confusion. It was a strange sense of familiarity, as if he had been waiting for that moment all along. Queen continued, You once walked these halls, stood on these lands. Long ago, when darkness threatened to consume us, you were here. But fate separated us. I searched across the stars, waiting for the day you would return. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his hands trembling slightly. If what you're saying is true, why don't I remember? Because your soul was reborn on Earth, she explained softly. Memories fade when lives change, but bonds of the heart never break. That is why the moment I saw you, I knew. You are my human, the one I have been waiting for. Silence filled the chamber. Daniel stared at her, lost in thought. Part of him wanted to deny everything, to insist she was wrong. But another part of him couldn't ignore the strange pull he felt toward her, the dreams that had haunted him, and the way her words seemed to unlock feelings he couldn't explain. The Queen then asked, Will you stay by my side, Daniel? Not because of prophecy, not because of destiny, but because you choose to. He swallowed hard. The weight of her words pressed on him. Stay by her side? In this world of wonders? He thought of Earth, of his quiet and lonely life of deserts and silence. Compared to this, Earth felt so small, but could he really belong here? Could he accept such a place, such a role? And I don't know, he admitted honestly. Everything feels too big for me. I'm not a hero, I'm not a leader, I'm just a man who likes to wander. The Queen smiled softly. Sometimes, those who do not seek greatness are the ones truly meant for it. Do not rush. Time will show you who you are meant to be. And that night, Daniel was given a chamber inside the palace. The bed floated gently above the floor. Glowing vines lit the walls and soft music seemed to hum from the air itself. Yet Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about her words, about the strange way she looked at him, about the whispers of the people calling him the one from the prophecy. He thought about Earth and how ordinary he had always felt, but here he was, treated like someone extraordinary. When he finally closed his eyes, the dreams returned. This time, they were clearer. He saw himself standing in armor of light, beside Queen Seraphina, holding a sword that glowed like fire. Together, they faced a wave of shadows trying to cover the land. In the dream, he was not afraid. He was strong, certain, and unshakable. He felt whole. Daniel woke up sweating, his heart racing. He whispered into the darkness of his chamber, What if she's right? What if I really was here before? And far away in her throne room, the Queen stood at a balcony, staring into the stars. She whispered to herself, I have found you again, Daniel. This time I will not let fate take you from me. The bond between them had only begun to grow, and though Daniel still doubted, he could no longer deny one truth. Something greater connected him to this world and to the Queen who believed he was hers. Pattern, multiple, false, replacement. The days in Ilaria continued to pass, but they were no longer peaceful. Whispers of unrest grew louder across the kingdom. The council spoke of enemies gathering beyond the borders, forces that wanted to see Seraphina's empire fall. Daniel could sense the tension even when no words were spoken. The palace guards were sharper in their movements, the advisors more cautious in their tone. And though the queen stood tall, her eyes sometimes carried the weight of worry. Daniel felt the change most of all when the council summoned him once again. This time their voices were colder, filled with doubt. One elder, tall and stern, spoke harshly. "Queen Seraphina, with all respect, how can we trust this human? He has no memory of his supposed past, no proof except your belief. How can a wanderer from Earth be the one our prophecies speak of?" Daniel sat quietly, his hands gripping his knees. He wanted to argue, but he knew they were not entirely wrong. He had no proof of who he was, only dreams and feelings. Before he could answer, Seraphina's voice cut through the chamber like steel. "Because I know him, and because the signs are already here. You saw what happened at the last gathering. He spoke truth that even your wisdom overlooked." Still, the council was not satisfied. They demanded a trial of truth. They would test Daniel with ancient relics said to respond only to the one spoken of in prophecy. If he succeeded, their doubts would end. If he failed, they would see him as nothing but a dangerous outsider. Pondering that night, Daniel could not sleep. He paced his chamber, his mind filled with fear. What if they're right? What if I fail and prove I'm just an ordinary man? He whispered to himself. His thoughts turned to Earth, where failure had never carried such weight. There, it only meant disappointment. Here it could mean exile or worse. As he stared at the glowing ceiling, the door opened quietly. Seraphina entered, her presence calm but filled with concern. She walked to him, her silver gown brushing softly against the floor. "You fear tomorrow," she said gently. Daniel sighed heavily. How could I not? If I fail, everything ends. They'll send me away. Maybe that's what should happen. Maybe I don't belong here. She stepped closer, placing her hand on his shoulder. Do you think I would mistake the soul I've searched for across lifetimes? Do you believe my heart would not know you? No trial can change who you are, Daniel. You belong here. You belong with me. Her words steadied him, though doubt still lingered. He nodded slowly. I'll try. That's all I can do. The next day, the trial began. In the heart of the palace stood the Chamber of Memories, a place few had entered. The walls were carved with ancient symbols that glowed faintly, and in the center rested 3 relics, an orb, a blade, and a crown of light. The council gathered around, their faces grave. Seraphina stood tall beside Daniel, though her eyes never left him. Then the elder spoke. Touch the relics. If they respond, we will know you are who she claims. If not, the truth will be clear. Anand Daniel's palms were sweaty as he stepped forward. First he reached for the orb. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, a pulse of light spread through the room. The orb floated from its pedestal and spun slowly in the air, glowing brighter with each turn. Gasps filled the chamber. Next was the blade. It was not sharp, but made of pure energy, resting silently in the air. When Daniel grasped its hilt, it burst into flames of golden light. The heat should have burned him, but instead, it felt warm and natural, as though the sword had been waiting for his touch. Finally, he turned to the crown. It hovered above the pedestal, faintly glowing. With a deep breath, Daniel placed it on his head. Instantly, visions filled his mind. Flashes of battles, of standing beside Seraphina long ago, of laughter, loss, and promises whispered under starlit skies. He staggered but did not fall. The crown shone so brightly that the council shielded their eyes. When the light faded, silence filled the chamber. Daniel stood there, his chest rising and falling heavily, the crown still glowing faintly on his head. The elder who had doubted him the most now bowed his head slowly. The prophecy is true. The one has returned. Non-relief washed through Daniel, but it was mixed with fear. The visions were too real, too heavy. They hinted at battles and sacrifices that were yet to come. Serafina stepped forward, her voice firm. "You see now, he is not just a man. He is the one meant to stand with me." But even as the council accepted him, danger grew beyond the palace walls. Scouts reported enemy movements at the borders, armies gathering, preparing to strike. The council urged immediate action, but Serafina's gaze fell on Daniel. "You saw something, didn't you? In the vision?" Daniel nodded slowly. "I saw darkness coming. I saw us standing together against it, but I also saw loss. I don't know what it means, but it felt real." Serafina's expression hardened. "Then we must be ready. Whatever comes, we will face it together." The following days were filled with preparation. Armies gathered, defenses were strengthened, and allies were called upon. Daniel trained with the blade he had awakened. Though he had never been a soldier on Earth, the weapon seemed to guide him, moving as if it remembered what his hands had forgotten. The guards who once doubted him now watched in awe as he sparred, his movements sharp and instinctive. Still, Daniel struggled with the weight of it all. At night, when he was alone, he questioned himself. Am I truly ready for this? What if I fail them? What if I fail her? But whenever fear grew too strong, Serafina was there. She never doubted, never wavered. She believed in him even when he could not believe in himself. One evening, as they stood on the palace balcony overlooking the glowing city, Serafina spoke softly. Do you know why I trust you so completely? Daniel shook his head. Why? None. Because you never sought this. You did not come for power or glory. You came with only questions, and yet you faced the answers with courage. That is what makes you worthy. That is what makes you mine. Her words lit a fire in his heart. For the first time, Daniel felt not just like a visitor or a lost wanderer, but like someone with purpose. He wasn't sure what the future would bring, but he knew he would not face it alone. The shadows gathered at the borders of Ilaria. Daniel stood ready. The shy human from Earth had awakened something deep within himself. And though fear still whispered in the back of his mind, a stronger voice now rose above it. The voice of destiny, and the voice of a queen who believed in him without question. The trial had proven more than his worth. It had proven that his path was tied to Serafina's and that together they would face the storm that was coming. Pattern. Multiple, false, replacement. The day the enemy finally arrived, Ilaria's skies darkened as massive shadowed ships approached from beyond the horizon. The city's glowing towers, which had always been peaceful and serene, now shone with warning lights, alerting every citizen and guard to prepare for battle. Daniel stood beside Serafina on the balcony of her palace, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this moment. The visions from his dreams, the trials, the strange connection he felt with her, all had built toward this day. And the queen's presence was calm, yet commanding. Her silver armor shimmered as she addressed the leaders and soldiers. Today, we face darkness not as separate beings, but as one. Protect our people, protect each other, and trust in those beside you. Daniel felt a surge of courage as he looked at her. There was no longer any doubt that he belonged here, no question about why he had been found. He gripped the hilt of the glowing blade that had chosen him, feeling its warmth pulse through him. He was ready. The enemy descended. A wave of shadowed figures rolled across the landscape. They moved swiftly, trying to overpower the guards at the gates. Daniel and Serafina led the defense, their movements synchronized, instinctive. Every strike Daniel made felt right, as if the weapon remembered countless battles he could not consciously recall. Each time Serafina raised her arms and summoned light, Daniel followed, amplifying the energy, pushing the darkness back. Neary. Battle stretched across the fields, rivers, and floating forests. Daniel could hear the cries of the defenders and the clash of light against shadow. Fear rose at moments, but Seraphina's gaze would find his, steady and unwavering, and he would feel it transform into strength. He began to realize the truth. Behind her words, together, they were unstoppable. Hours passed, yet Daniel felt as though time had slowed. He moved through the battlefield, guiding those around him, protecting the innocent, and facing enemies that seemed impossible to defeat. Each moment tested him, but with each test he grew stronger. He remembered his visions, the battles he had seen in dreams, and it was as though they were teaching him, preparing him to act in real life. Finally, at the center of the chaos, Daniel and Seraphina confronted the enemy leader, a massive figure cloaked in darkness, its presence crushing and cold. The air around them seemed to pulse with its power. The queen's voice rang out like a bell. "You will not harm my people. Not today, not ever." Daniel stepped forward, his sword glowing brighter than ever. "We stand together," he declared, "and together we are stronger than your shadows." And the enemy struck, a wave of darkness sweeping toward them, but Daniel and Seraphina moved as one. Their combined light shattered the darkness, sending waves of energy through the battlefield. The enemy faltered, then tried again, but each attempt was met with their unbreakable bond of strength and trust. Slowly, piece by piece, the shadowed army was pushed back until at last, the leader itself fell, its darkness dissolving into nothingness. The battlefield grew silent. Soldiers and citizens emerged from hiding, cheering as the remaining shadows fled. The sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light over the city. Daniel looked around, feeling the exhaustion in his muscles, but also a deep satisfaction. They had done it. They had protected Ilaria together. And Seraphina approached him, her silver armor glinting in the morning sun. She reached out, taking his hand. "You were incredible," she whispered. "I knew you would be. I never doubted it for a moment." Daniel shook his head, smiling tiredly. "I couldn't have done it without you. You made me believe I could." Her eyes softened and she pulled him into a hug. "And you made me believe in hope again, Daniel. That is why you are mine, and I am yours. We were always meant to find each other." And then, in the days that followed, Ilaria celebrated their victory. Daniel was no longer just a visitor or a human from Earth. He was a hero, a partner to the Queen, a symbol of hope for the people. The palace that once felt strange and otherworldly now felt like home. The council who had doubted him now praised him, and the citizens welcomed him as one of their own. And in Daniel and Seraphina spent quiet moments together, walking through the glowing forests, floating over the silver rivers, and watching the twin suns set. He shared stories of Earth, simple yet meaningful tales of deserts, oceans, and stars. And she shared her dreams for Ilaria, for peace, and for the future they would build together. One evening, as they sat by a crystal lake that reflected the shimmering sky, Seraphina turned to Daniel and whispered the same words she had said the first time she found him. "I've finally found you, my human." This time, Daniel did not question it. He took her hand, smiling softly. "And I've finally found where I belong." And they stood together as the stars began to appear in the sky, their hands intertwined, hearts united. The battles, the fears, the trials, they were all behind them. Ahead lay a life of purpose, of love, and of partnership that stretched beyond worlds. Daniel had come as a wanderer from Earth, lost and unsure, but he had found destiny, courage, and the love of a queen who had searched across the stars to find him. And in that moment, as the twin moons of Ilaria rose above them, Daniel knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, he and Seraphina would face them together side by side as equals, as partners, and as soulmates. The human who had wandered deserts had finally become a part of something far greater than himself, and he would never forget that the moment it all began with a hug and a whisper that changed his life forever.